Pleased to be joined now by the middleweight champion of the world, Israel Adesanya, who will be taking on Robert Whittaker at UFC 271 in Houston this weekend. Now, my first question for you, do you feel like the scariest thing about Robert Whittaker going into this fight is that he's kind of at peace with himself?
Not the scariest thing, but I made note of it early on when I was doing press for this fight. I've said that I'm glad he's accepted what I was telling him in 2019, which was that you are acting out of character. And he wasn't being true to himself. And this is free advice I gave him, and he chose to spit on it. And yeah, he paid dearly for it. So I think kind of like I guess Alcoholics Anonymous, the first step is accepting that you're an alcoholic. So he's accepted that. And I said that makes him dangerous. But he's saying all the right things, but I just don't really believe him. But it's not really, it's him. It's him that has to believe his own shit. So yeah, good on him.
Now, I was on your YouTube page and you were talking to a mysterious newcomer in the journalism world, Dave Blackamoto, who I'm hoping to meet one day. If you
Yeah,
were,
it's pretty good.
he's pretty good. He asked great questions. So he talked about your intro in the last fight against Whittaker and how that kind of gave you something to think about, making the fight a little bit secondary. What's going to be your primary thought during fight week that's going to make the fight secondary this time around, since that formula was so successful the first time?
Yeah, that was something I did in the first fight. Not really for that purpose, but it just had that effect that I was just so excited about the intro. I wasn't really worried about the fight itself, because I knew I had the fight in the bag, and I knew I'd done the work to be able to take this guy out. Um, this time, I know what it is, but I just can't tell you. I'm excited about something. I'm really, 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 really looking forward to after this fight. But that's for me to know and y'all to mind your business.
All right, I'll ask you about it after the fight. But what have you done in other fights after the Whittaker fight that you focused on during fight week that have kind of helped you take your mind off of the fight and made that your primary focus? Can you give me some other examples?
You mean on the Whitaker fight week?
Or no, like the subsequent fights that you've had since the Whittaker fight?
Ooh. It's hard to say, but I mean, I've already said like the last year was kind of boring when it came to fighting for me, because I failed my side mission, and also the Vittori fight was just kind of like meh, because he was being super defensive. But yeah, yeah, can't remember, to be honest.
One thing you've talked about going into this fight is the different restrictions in New Zealand. And Malcolm Gordon was on this past weekend's card. He's from Ontario. And he tried to get, and I guess, something from the government that would allow him to train because he's a professional athlete fighting for a professional organization on national television networks, pay-per-view, etc. Why do you think that it's taking so long for these different countries and municipalities to accept professional mixed martial arts as a sport? And meanwhile, they're having all of these team sports where people are in close quarters with one another competing in these different countries.
You tell me. That's a really good question, Aaron. I think it's just old heads. They're old and out of touch. They're out of touch with what's actually happening in the streets with the young generation. So they think, and I hate the term they keep using, traditional sports, especially in New Zealand, like, oh, it's not a traditional sport. I'm like, tradition is what you make it. And they glorify, you know, 130 kg men running into each other like battering rams, causing car crashes with their heads. But then, say that's tradition. And you should see the injuries and the brain damage that will cause with rugby. But yeah, look at our sport and go, ooh, yuck. But I think it's just, like I said, it's old heads who are out of touch. And they will die off soon. A lot of them would die off soon, and the young generation will take over and actually, yeah, run things the way it should be run. But yeah, I just think it's just oligarchs and all these just need to just fuck off and die.
And as a result of this, you're not planning on representing New Zealand, I guess, in the future or fighting in New Zealand?
Nope, I am not fighting in New Zealand at all, just because I fought there a lot of times. And when I told them, I was like, look, you guys should come enjoy us while we fight right now, because you don't know where we're going to end up. But guess what? I did. I knew where I was going to end up. But I just didn't know this was going to happen. I never knew I was going to take the stand. So yeah, nah. They can make that money through rugby, through cricket, through netball, or whatever else. Just they'll never get millions and millions and tens and hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue from any of my fights. That can go to Australia. Aussie, Aussie, Aussie.
You know, it's kind of funny because 10 years ago, I was looking at this. The only champion outside of America or Brazil was George St. Pierre from Canada, of course.
Want to repeat
Australia and
that?
New Zealand weren't really on the map in terms of combat sports, but the way that yourself, Alexander Volkanovski, and of course your opponent Robert Whittaker have put mixed martial arts on the map and made it a source of pride for your country, I think should be embraced rather than, like you said, kind of put off to the side.
100%. And I mean, me and him are not, the best of friends, me and Rob, but what he has done for um, Oceania mixed martial arts, for Australian mixed martial arts, has been phenomenal. His rise to the top from the tough
Smashes.
series, yeah, nations, tough nations, to them becoming a middleweight champion must be applauded. I was rooting for him. I was like, man, it doesn't matter. Like, just we're all fighters. We're all dudes on the same kind of mission, just taking different roads. I'm just taking a different path myself. But yeah, we should be hailed. We should be hailed. A guy like I'm glad Alexander had the fight he had the last time because yeah, that fight put him on the map and let people know because he already beat Max Holloway twice, right? So I don't know why people were still sleeping on him. And he's beaten Jose Aldo, Chad Mendes, and I'm like, bro, you guys are sleeping on Alex. And I know Alex, man. I know he's a motherfucker. So the way he fought Ortega last time and then escaped that guillotine, I felt like that, kind of like the way the Gastelum fight was for me. That was his legendary moment, one of his legendary moments, and that put him on the pedestal. So hopefully, Australia should hail him as well as one of the greats, not just fighters, but great sporting athletes from that country.
It's been great watching your reactions to the different fights that you're watching, but one really stuck out to me. It's probably one that doesn't really stick out to a lot of people, but it was when you were watching Alex Pereira fight Andreas Michailidis in New York. I know you guys have some history. He's new to the UFC, but do you think that there's a chance that your paths are going to cross in the UFC? You called it to a T exactly how he was about to finish his opponent, which I thought was remarkable.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. My coaches don't think so, but I hope so because that's the arc in the story I like. The guy that finished me in kickboxing, he comes to MMA to try and do the same thing, living off the same clout for the last 10 years or whatever it was. But yeah, I hope so. And I just want to implore you journalists to do your research before you start talking about that fight and taking too much stake in it. You need to look at the first fight and then look at what happened before the knockout in the second fight, because I think a lot of you don't even realize that I hurt him, and you don't realize why I didn't stay true to my style and didn't finish him in that fight. So yeah, I implore you to actually do your research before you just watch the headlines or the highlight of the end, and yeah, speak on it later on. But he's only had one fight in the UFC. Calm your tits. Like, yeah, let him do some work. Let him do some work first. He's a long way from seeing me.
Yeah, I mean, also to be mentioned that Pereira, of the last 10 years, is one of the greatest kickboxers we've seen. 2-division champion in glory. And the first fight, like you said, extremely competitive. I think it was what, a split decision or something along those lines?
Yeah, I think the judges were a bit blind on that one. They were kind of like, oh, okay. But yeah, the second fight, it is what it is. But, don't give him too much sign. Right now, we're worried about one person, and that's Robert Whittaker, the Reaper.
Another thing I've seen you talk about is your mental health and how talking to a therapist has been extremely helpful for you. And that those with mental illness, of course, need therapists, but everybody will often, they'll say that you don't need to go to a therapist unless you have mental illness or mental health
That's like
issues in particular. And I think it's been very good that you've been spreading that message.
Yeah, that's like saying I don't need to go to a doctor. Like, it's the stupidest thing. A doctor? Who goes to a fucking doctor? I just tough it out. Like, it's the stupidest thing. And I don't even like the way people use the term. The way people use the term is stupid because they go, oh, this guy has mental health. I'm like, everyone has mental health. Like, everyone has physical health. But what you're trying to say is that guy's mentally ill. That's all. He has a mental health illness. So people are kind of still new to the way they use the terminology. And I'm just like, no, if you don't look after your physical health, you're going to get physically ill. Just the same way if you don't look after your mental health, you're going to get mentally ill. And then you're going to have to see a specialist or, stay ill. But yeah, I think people just need to people are waking up to it. So it's good to see. And yeah, I'm a hipster to the party.
I can't remember if this was after the Gastelum fight or the first Whittaker fight, but you talked about how you went and sat on a bench and you just wanted to kind of take it in. It was your last moment of kind of anonymity before you became champion.
This was after the after the Whittaker fight. This was after the Gastelum fight in Atlanta, I think. This was in that. I think it was in Atlanta. I just walked around the city, around the hotel, and just kind of, I wasn't, who's that? Sorry. Sorry, someone was just disturbing. There's a lot of people in this house. But yeah, I just sat down. This is even before my UFC debut. After my UFC debut in Perth, I just sat there. I just sat there and I walked around the streets and I just soaked it in, being unrecognized. But thank God for masks these days because I can kind of do the same thing and just have a hat and a mask on and just yeah, stay anonymous like a ninja.
One more thing I want to ask you about. You have a good friendship with the welterweight champion of the world, Kamaru Usman, and his manager was saying that if the price was right, he sees that fight potentially happening. Now, Kamaru hasn't said a word about this, and I believe that the idea is that both of you are representing Nigeria as champions in separate divisions, so why try to have one less Nigerian champion? But is that true, that if the price was right, you would consider that fight?
Kamaru can speak for himself, and he has, and I've spoken for myself. We said we wouldn't fight each other. This, for me personally, it's bigger than money. Also, I have nothing to gain. Like it's the guy coming up from the lower weight class that looks to challenge himself. That's the almost the protagonist of the story that gets to rise to the occasion, and that's cool. But Kamaru's not interested. Ali's just greedy. He sees dollar signs, but I'm like, you can make that money elsewhere. But he's just super greedy, and yeah, for me, it's bigger than money. This is if I was gonna do this for money and retire, I would have retired 3 fights ago. I'm set, but no, it's bigger than money. It's just about legacy. It's about I'm still I'm still looking to capture that image of me, Kamaru, and Francis as the three kings because we haven't done that yet together. And maybe even on the magazine cover of Time magazine or something crazy, Sports Illustrated. Yeah, so it's bigger than money. It's bigger than that. Um, excuse me. I understand what Kamaru says about competing because yeah, we can do that. Like come to the gym, you'll see me and Dan Hooker, me and Carlos Albert, me and Blood Diamond compete against each other. So me and Kamaru can do that. But for the world to see, it's bigger than money. It's not just about money. It's about our nation taking gold back to where it belongs.
All right, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. Best of luck this weekend against Robert Whitaker, UFC 271 for the main event. Always appreciate your time.
All good. Thanks, Aaron.